It's not really a secret that I think Smash 4 was not a very good game, which always causes a decent amount of commenters to accuse me of being a Melee elitist, and that I simply dislike newer Smash games because they're not Melee. But that's just simply not true. When I've made it known, I enjoy every other Smash game for what they are. They are all fun, unique games that made me want to stay up late and explore everything they had to offer. I didn't get that with 4, but with Smash Ultimate, despite the positives and negatives or anything else in between, the best compliment I can give it is it has its own identity. This feels like its own game, one that I've already spent many a night staying up playing like I did as a kid. With this video, I really want to dive deep into why that is, as well as those negatives I mentioned, because this game is surely not without its flaws, many of which don't have to stay though. So let's start with what many would say is the most important aspect. One of the first things I obviously noticed right away was the feel of the gameplay. Unlike the previous game, which just felt like a direct upgrade to Brawl, Smash Ultimate has a unique playstyle to it. The game has been sped up quite a bit in many areas, particularly moves in general have far less lag on them. Aerials specifically can feel almost as fast as Melee, or in some cases even faster. Another notable change that contributes to the sped up nature of the game is the improved movement. Dash dancing is more or less back, and you can perform any action with the exception of shielding immediately out of a dash, as well as instantly being able to perform a short hop aerial with the button combination of jump and A. These changes, coupled with nerfs and just general changes to a lot of Smash 4's best defensive options, leads to matches being played much more aggressively, instead of the game overly rewarding defensive playstyles. Rolls lose effectiveness the more they're used, shields take more damage and regenerate slower, shield grabbing is less effective, and other defensive maneuvers like air dodging generally have more ending lag on them. Speaking of air dodges, Sakurai decided to change the way they work to be more reminiscent of Melee again, allowing players to steer in different directions while performing them, at the cost of even more lag frames, and a likely death if the directional air dodge is done while off stage. Now, hit stun was also noticeably increased. This, together with the increased speed of the roster, the nerfed defensive options, magnet hands being heavily toned down, as well as rage being nerfed, means that combos and juggling beyond the most basic ones present in Smash 4 are actually possible again. There's also the addition of the parry, which can be performed while shielding, but even at high level play, it doesn't seem to affect matches much. I think it's too early to say what effect this will have on the game as a whole, but now it doesn't seem to get much use, and honestly that's fine. My only hope is changes to it in the future won't make the game overly defensive again. Lastly, while it is too early to say definitely, it seems this game's roster is far more balanced. People will point to Smash 4 and say it was balanced in comparison to games like Melee, but proportionally, it's exactly the same relative to the size of the roster. And we already know how much of a mess Meta Knight was in Brawl. Here though, again, it's too early to say for sure, I need to preface this, but most top players looking at the roster and seeing it develop seem to think even the bottom isn't so far from the top, having their own strengths. Where previously you would have characters like Brawl's Ganondorf, Melee's Kirby, Smash 4's Jigglypuff, all these characters just felt so much worse than the rest of the cast. A big contributing factor to this is some top Japanese players were invited to help with development by Sakurai, as well as the man finally stepping down himself from being the sole factor in determining balance. Going forward, a dedicated team will be handling this, and it already shows. It might not be important to a lot of people, at most levels of play, tiers mean nothing at all. But it's important in that it shows the extra work that went into this game. And even as a casual, it felt good finally feeling like Groy isn't garbage, even if he was always my garbage. However, despite all of these improvements, Ultimate's gameplay was also subject to a few, let's say, unfortunate changes. The first thing that many people will notice feeling a bit off is the increased amount of inherent input lag the game has. It's about 2 to 4 frames less responsive than the other titles in the series. While it is annoying and definitely something I'd like to see change, I ended up adjusting relatively quickly. My bigger issue stems from the changes to the C-Stick and the added buffering on moves to Smash Ultimate. The simplest way to explain buffering is while you're doing a move, you can input what you want to do next on the controller, and it'll come out after the previous move finishes. This doesn't sound entirely negative, and yeah, it isn't, but what this leads to is situations where you input something on accident, maybe you mash A one too many times or hold a direction for too long, accidentally leading you to a move or action you didn't want to do. There's also other situations where maybe you were inputting a move and then you were hit. This could change your positioning or just lead to a situation where you don't want to do that thing you were about to do. But unfortunately, you didn't react 100% perfectly, and that move you tried to input is now buffered. So you're going to do it after, most likely leading to a bad situation. Now, there is a positive side to this in that it makes comboing easier, especially online, since the move will come out frame 1 and you don't need to worry about lag. While this might have been the reasoning to make this a feature, the negatives are undeniable. In the future, I'd love to see an option in controls to turn off the buffer, like the new stick sensitivity option. Now, with the C-stick, the issue comes from how it registers inputs. In a past game like Melee, doing a move on the C-stick would register you doing that move, whether it be back air, up air, forward smash, whatever. However, here in Ultimate, it works as a shortcut to the button combination, so instead of hitting up on the stick, creating up air when you're in the air, what the game registers is you holding up on the control stick with A. Again, this might not even sound like an issue at first, but what this leads to is changing your momentum when doing aerials, as well as sometimes outright giving you the wrong aerials, specifically when you buffer. Now, when it comes to characters, I don't think you can ever really say a game in the series has gotten worse, but it is important to point out that for this entry, there was an obvious effort to please as many fans as possible, more so than in the past. Most obviously, everyone being here, including characters like Snake, which probably wasn't the easiest to wrangle from Konami's hands. The fact that there's no new voice lines or changes to previous ones, possibly being evidence of that.
Do you have any idea how excited people are that he's here in Brawl?
But going further, the roster of new additions to this game are full of fan favorites. While you might not like every addition and even think one or two choices are outright bad,
No! God! Damn!
I imagine most people will at least find one character they've been hoping for, possibly for years now, whether it be Ridley, K. Rool, Simon, or any of the rest.
He did it! He's here! Fuck everyone on Smash boards!
I also want to specifically touch on my point from my last video on Smash 4. I made a complaint about how clones, or now echoes, are handled. Ganondorf in particular, despite being the big bad of the Zelda series, still played like an F-Zero racer, after being in 3 entries in the series and being planned for 2 of them. Additional work was finally done on him, giving him a sword and just generally making him feel more like a unique fighter. I still don't think this version of Ganondorf truly captures the character, but it is much closer. In fact, a lot of fighters sharing similarities seem to now be further distinct, and many characters got much needed updates to their movesets, unless you're Samus. Truthfully, Sakurai either really hates this character, or someone at the office must just be really good with her, because 5 games in and this jab still doesn't connect. The last thing I want to talk about for characters is custom moves, or lack thereof. This might sound like a negative, but if you recall my previous complaints, I view this as a positive. The changes were minor at best, changing nearly nothing in some cases. Even the enjoyment you could have with it was minimal, due to it being a tedious process to unlock. It could take upwards of 1,000 hours. I would have much rather had that work gone into the core moveset of characters, and here it did seemingly. Sure, if custom moves were done well and unlocked from the start, then there's potential there. But as they were, I'd much rather have them removed. Palutena might be the most clear example of a benefit from this, as she plays much better in this game. Instead of her development time being put into multiple different special moves, the cut here might also be why a lot of older characters got updates as well, instead of a minimal amount like past entries. It's also important to note that the Miis still have custom moves, and I think that's a good choice as they are in fact custom characters, that I realistically still wish weren't here, but moving on to stages, this is a bit different than characters. While I do think you'd be hard pressed to say a previous game had a worse roster than its predecessor, that's exactly how I feel about Smash 4 when it comes to stages. There are only a few good stages in the game, with nearly all of them coming from past entries. And a lot of the newer stages just had too many gimmicks to be fun to play on, such as Wily's Castle. The 3DS version fared better, and honestly it is the best part of that version, but the Wii U just falls flat, and feels like a downgrade from Brawl. The game's solution to this was Omega Mode, turning every stage into a copy of Final Destination. Obviously this wasn't the most elegant solution, as flat stages put some characters at a much bigger disadvantage than others, and they're also just kinda boring.
Why am I only playing projectile characters on FD? God, if I didn't have 10k subs.
As I said in a previous video, it seems like Omega stages were based entirely on the Fox-only Final Destination no-item Mei-Meis. I don't want to play with absurd hazards, does not mean I only want to play on a flat line. I like interesting stage designs, but I want to feel like I'm fighting the player, not the stage. On the other hand, Ultimate rid these problems entirely. There's around 100 stages in the series taken from every entry, leaving us with a plethora of options to choose from. Pretty much all the best stages from the series' histories have returned, including my personal favorite, Fountain of Dreams. Sadly, a few of the most unfun ones have made a comeback as well, but even for those lackluster stages, the ones covered in hazards, we now have the option to turn them hazardless, as well as a alpha or battlefield option for everything, a much better alternative to the FD variants. This stage list is honestly amazing. The only thing lacking is Poke-Floats. But as cool as all these options are, sadly they are held back by some very questionable menu design choices. Hazardless stages are an amazing addition, but why do I need to go leave character selection, leave stage selection, and make an entirely custom rule set just to use them? Why can't I toggle hazardless stages whenever I feel like it, the same way it works with Battlefield and Omega stages? In fact, choosing rules in general became far more tedious. You used to be able to change things on the fly, which was nice. You might not always want the exact same rules, and maybe you want to adjust things between matches. However, now you have to make a completely new rule set to change minor things. It would have been great if we could just set our default rules like previous entries, where it was 2-minute free-for-all, making it 3 stock or whatever we wish by default, but still edit the rules in general on the fly. Another thing that, while minor, really baffled me is how the roster is ordered on the select screen. Every prior entry, characters would be ordered with their series, making finding a specific character rather easy. Like, yeah, I've put 1,000 hours into these games, but if you put a gun to my head and told me to order these games' rosters, I'd probably just tell you to pull the trigger. So this was nice, and I just overall really like the look of seeing everyone in a series together. Smash 4 changed this with DLC and what we now call Echo Fighters being separated, which was annoying to me as is, but it was minor. Here, the entire roster is ordered by appearance though, and it just feels like a mess finding characters sometimes. I get it, it's not a big deal, but it just feels like an unnecessary change, when there's options in the menu to already change the roster to some degree, putting Echoes in the same spot as their original counterpart. So if you're going to go through the work of adding some customization to it, why not give me the traditional character screen as an option as well? These aren't the only instances of menu navigation being pointlessly tedious in Ultimate, they are just some examples. And while I do like the menu design in general, the look of it, much like Smash 4, parts of it are just a mess. I still don't get why Games and More is a category, like, come on, literally everything here can be Games and More. This is just a really stupid title. Single-player modes are interesting when it comes to Smash. I would argue most returning modes over the course of the series' lifespan deteriorate in quality. Let's take Target Smash for example. In the first 2 games we got individual courses that test your skill with the character, and Brawl was downgraded to a few universally boring courses. Then in 4 we got Angry Birds. So while there are less modes in general here for single player, I can honestly say they are the best versions of those modes in the series, with one exception. The most obvious example here would be Classic Mode, another mode that, just like Target Smash, kept degrading in quality over the past few games. Each fighter gets their own route now, ending in some cases with a boss specifically for them. This makes the mode feel far less tedious to play through with multiple characters, as well as making it more interesting. You never know what the theming is or how it'll relate to the character. Marth, for instance, fights all the dragon-like fighters in the game, ending with a match with Rathalos from Monster Hunter. Jigglypuff goes to the original N64 route, ending in a match with Giant Donkey Kong. Wii Fit Trainer fights all the fatties, Wolf fights the returning characters that missed out on previous games, and so on. This is just really cool and a major upgrade from what we had previously. My only criticism of this mode is it feels like there's a lot of missed opportunity here, like half the cast still fights Master and Crazy Hand, but it's even for characters who have obvious options for bosses like Samus fighting Ridley. I mean, we brought back the random robot guy from Subspace, why not just use the old Ridley boss from Brawl, or just do a giant Ridley fight? Overall, this is easily the best we've gotten, I just love to see it taken further. Which brings us to this game's adventure mode. Most people I still see saying that Brawl's Subspace was the best, but to that I have to say, have you actually gone back and played it? Subspace gameplay wise was awful. It felt like a knockoff Kirby game with generic enemies, worlds, and just, well, nearly every element of it. Yes, the cutscenes are great and they made playing through it worth it because you were chasing after getting to the next scene, but in terms of play, not so much. Here, adventure mode is maybe not exactly what I want it to be, but it's pretty close to it. Smash modes to me are at their best when they remix the core gameplay of the series, instead of being some random bullshit like Smash Tour. Here you're tasked with going around several maps, a good portion based off the series represented in the game. Like, I remember the first time I discovered one of these, I took a plane to, well, the real world I guess, traveling to each country and fighting Street Fighter characters, like how you'd go through Street Fighter 2. Then after, I ended up going to Donkey Kong Country, then Skyworld. This was all really cool to me. There's also a few more interesting surprises for those who haven't played it yet, but I won't spoil that much here. Throughout this journey, the gameplay is just Smash battles with certain conditions for each battle, much like event matches of old. My main, and honestly, yes, it is a huge criticism, is there really isn't cutscenes for this mode. The only form of character interaction comes in the one we saw at the Direct, before the game released. And the other three are really just simple. It's a huge disappointment, and the one area Subspace still wins overall. It really is a shame because Kid Icarus Uprising is one of my favorite games, and it just goes to show how good Sakurai can be at character writing, as he wrote the script for it. It would be a dream to see him write out another story like Brawl's, but with voice work and more interaction. It's just a shame I'm probably never going to get that dream, because the man seemingly thinks it's worth missing out on such an amazing opportunity just so people can't look at the cutscenes on the internet. Now, alternatively, a counterpart to this mode is Spirits. Even closer to what event matches were in the past, periodically random spirit matches will appear on this board, allowing you to have a battle with certain restrictions and rules. I like this mode as well, as it's kind of the insta-dopamine counterpart to adventure mode. You can just do a match or two instead of this sprawling adventure. Upon beating spirits in either of these modes, you can unlock them and equip them to your character for your own buffs and counters to even the playing field in these fights. Now, I don't really have anything negative to say about the mode spirits. However, one thing I did really like though were how some spirits weren't actually challenging at all. This was done in an attempt to truly capture each character, meaning some fights are just silly and easy, which is kind of charming, but spirits in general were kind of a disappointing addition to me in a weird way. They were effectively a replacement for trophies in terms of the main collectible, and while this is not a big deal in the grand scheme of things, it's just kind of sad. The idea of trophies just feel like such a core part of what Smash is as a series, especially ever since Amiibos came along and gave us a real-world counterpart to it. I would have much preferred spirits stayed as they were mechanically, but they were trophies instead. It just feels like something's missing now, and they could have just ripped models from games like they did with Smash 4. But I guess the trade-off is the loads of new hentai that was based off this concept. Nintendo's just been really good at inadvertently adding to the hentai folder lately. Anyway, another mode I previously complained about got quite the overhaul as well. Training mode was so lackluster that it didn't even have all the mechanics of the game enabled within it. Here, it feels more up to par with the type of training modes usually present in fighting games, giving you a grid stage to help you learn spacing, showing you the trajectory of moves at multiple percentages, and a few other nifty features. Overall, it's still flawed for sure. Trajectories don't show any variation on DI, for example, and there's still a bunch of features I'd like to be added, but it's still a vast improvement over previous games. The last area of single-player modes I want to touch on is All-Star, as well as Multi-Man. Now, I'm grouping these together because All-Star's treatment is indicative of exactly how past modes are usually treated. Instead of a mode where you fight every character in small groups while being allocated a limited amount of healing in a rest area that lets you balance risk and reward of continuing at higher damage, it's now just a reskin of Multi-Man. All the unique fun that this mode once had was stripped away, and it now feels like a shallow husk. This is exactly the type of thing I've come to expect of this series, and it's a shame to see, since the other modes just feel like some of the best versions we've gotten. As for Multi-Man itself, it's more of the same. This is one mode that really never changes with each game, and that's fine. Don't fix what isn't broken, I guess. I just personally miss the old polygon and wireframe teams. Since this is Smash Ultimate, it would have been nice to see old versions make an appearance, maybe in different difficulties. I think overall though, what it comes down to is the majority of modes in Smash Ultimate are really good, there just isn't enough. I still think as an overall package of single player content, I end up preferring Melee because there's just not a single mode in it I disliked. Having classic, all-star, adventure, multi-man, home run contest, target smash, events, I loved playing them all. I think it's not out of the question for a mode to return in the future as DLC. I think if we got personalized target smashes later down the line, or even something simple like home run contest, it would really improve the single player experience of Smash Ultimate. Because again, while I do really like what's here, there's just not enough of it. Now, there's also a few multiplayer exclusive modes I'd like to comment on. Special Smash and Turning return as before, but we've also got a few new additions, first of which is Squad Strike. If you were unfortunate enough to play Smash Tour, then you remember the only kind of fun part of it was at the end. You got to have a stock match with whatever fighters you picked up. I've always thought this would have been a much better addition as a mode of its own. In the tag team version of Squad Strike, it's exactly that. Each player picks 3 or 5 fighters and they become your stocks for the match. Alternatively, this mode also comes with elimination. Here, once you lose your stock, the match ends and the next character from the losing team fights the previous winner, still keeping some of the damage taken from the previous round. With the final format best of, the first team to get 2 or 4 wins, depending on your chosen fighter amount, wins. Of course, for all of these modes, each stock or character can be an individual person, which as you can imagine adds a lot of fun and utility to these modes. Now, the last new versus mode they added was Smash Down. If you're familiar with Iron Man matches, then this mode might seem familiar. Basically, you and your opponent choose a character, have a match, and then when you go back to the character select screen, those characters are unselectable. You do this until the entire roster has been played. Whoever has the most wins at the end is the winner. This is exactly the type of thing I like to see. These are all great addition to Smash's multiplayer, whether you just want something different to do with friends or even adding a fun little side event to tournaments. I really just can't think of a single complaint I have with them. Well, except one. Okay, so throughout this video, I hope I've made it clear that despite having a few problems with the game and finding nitpicks here and there, I still really love Ultimate. For the most part, it's a lot of fun and very well made, but then there's the online mode. I just got done praising the additions to Versus mode the game has, but sadly none of them are available online, especially with the tournament mode. This seems like a bizarre design choice. Smash 4 had a tournament mode that was usable online and for good reason. Nobody just has 32 local friends hanging around in person who all want to use this mode together. While as an online mode, it just makes perfect sense, especially in the age of online tournaments and streaming. Other Nintendo games like Mario Tennis Aces and Mario Kart all handle this feature well. So why is Smash of all things so lacking? This is already a big knock against the game, yet it's still hardly talked about as it's actually far from the biggest problem with Ultimates Online. In comparison to the more serious problems, it actually seems almost insignificant. I've complained about Smash 4's online in the past, but at least it had some logic to it. Even if For Glory was based off of a meme, there was still a clear distinction between competitive and casual, as well as offering other online modes like Tournament. This was the bare minimum experience, but here it's so abysmal that I miss that lackluster time I used to have. Instead of clear modes for competitive and casual, you now make your own rule set, which I bet that sounds fine at first. I praised it in a previous video. But the problem is you are suggesting rules you want when you do this. You can ask for one-on-one battles with no hazards or items and be thrown into a 4-player free-for-all, with everything turned on.
God, Nintendo, why is your online so good? Look, I have more lag. I'm not playing a mode I wanted to. This is great. I fucking love Nintendo.
This isn't even a rare occurrence either. I've had streams where this happened in upwards of 4 times in a row. They've improved this now in a recent update where it will prioritize your choice, but it still happens and it is still unacceptable. I understand that there's a need to make sure there aren't super long queue times in games, but there's better ways to negate this without ruining the experience for all players. What should happen, if anything, is if I select one-on-one with no items, then I should at least be placed in that. Even if I have battlefield stages selected and my opponent had FD with less stocks, then that's fine. It's still close enough to what I'm looking for. I don't always expect to play on the exact stages I want with friends or competing, so it's a fair alternative. Even if the mode worked like this, I wish I could set the stages I want or just choose one specific stage. Ultimate stage list is again massive with so many choices, but it feels butchered here because I don't want to turn on all of them, even with no hazards since some are still just kind of jank. Having just Battlefield and FG to choose from still kinda sucks. This would be a minor point if it was the only issue, but it just adds to how gimped the online experience truly feels. As it is now, you're placing more serious players in with complete casuals. This doesn't just ruin the experience with one group, it ruins it for everyone. People who just want to mess around don't want to be put in with tryhards, and people who want to play seriously don't want to be stuck with all the wackiness Smash can have. At the very least, give players the options to decline and keep waiting, instead of forcing you to play something you actively said you don't want to, or you get punished. Like, there is an option for someone to jump into any kind of match with quick play, so why is this a thing? Why are we forcing players to do this? Now, you might say, well, that's what battle arenas are for, but these two are handled so horribly compared to other games using similar systems. One of the main problems immediately noticeable is the fact that there is only one arena. Every other game that has this type of system allows multiple people to fight at once, but instead here it feels like I'm playing the fucking Division. You spend most of your time waiting in line, unless you do this solely to play with a friend. The issues don't even stop there. The more people you have in the lobby, the laggier it gets. The game even tells you that itself, in fact. This limits one of the core uses of this mode. My guess is this is because Smash runs on peer-to-peer connections and it streams the match to everyone instead of just one player. While it makes sense, the fact that the system works like this and you're not able to opt out of it is truly repugnant. The last thing I want to touch on here is GSP. While most of the choices here fall into this category, it's perhaps the one I can mostly describe as why. Global Smash Power, or GSP for short, is Smash's ranking system, which is used to get you into the equivalent of what Smash's ranked mode is. In most games, you usually have to reach a certain level and then you're allowed to play in ranked modes, where you're given a rank. Here in Smash, instead you're given GSP. The number goes up the more times you do something with a specific character, and this number tells you how many people you're better than. It's obvious why this system was put into place. It's so little Timmy, who got the game as a gift, just sees a big number next to his rank, which was fine in Smash 4, but now that it actually does something, this creates a lot of annoying problems. To get into Elite Smash, the number is constantly changing. Every time a new player comes online, it's affected. Only the top 3% of players, I believe, for each character can make it in. Though even top players I watch still complain about getting wacky rule sets, so I'm not even sure this is too big of a deal that everyone can access it. But it could be so much better. For example, what could happen is if GSP went up just as you played more and more, like most games, requiring you a certain amount of playtime, then you can keep this high number, but you make a set point where people can play the ranked mode. Then once you're in the ranked mode, you can be given a separate number per character. This would fix the issues with the system and allow little Timmy to have his big number. As it is, GSP doesn't really give you any sort of accurate measurement of where you stand, and just feels like a complete mess that wasn't really thought through. Which is just how I would explain this online mode as a whole. It feels like monkeys programmed it. Even ignoring the baffling decisions, the infrastructure is abysmal. The netcode is absolutely horrible. According to some top players such as Leffen, even at what is supposed to be a 1-to-1 connection with 1 to 2 milliseconds of ping, there are multiple frames of input delay. With the average player being on Wi-Fi or having suboptimal connections, the match quality usually varies between mediocre to unplayable. Add to this that the game already has quite a lot of inherent input lag and awkward buffer system, and you have yourself an experience where way too many things are unreactable and unpunishable, as well as just way too imprecise. I think now that we are forced to pay for online functionality, we should be able to demand at least a little bit more than, literally the worst online mode of the decade. So, with all that being said, I do really enjoy Ultimate, and think it's the first time we've gotten a truly great Smash game since Melee. It has its flaws, but most of these things can be fixed with time, and that's something I'd love to see. Too often when it comes to these videos, the smallest criticism of a Nintendo game will lead people to thinking I hate it because I don't praise every little inch of it. But the reason I'm being so critical of points is because I care. I want to see this game be as good as it can be. In fact, there are a few things that make me hopeful for this game's future. As I touched on, balance updates are mostly going to be handled by a team working entirely separate from Sakurai, for example, which is a big plus considering how Smash 4, despite constantly nerfing every character under the sun, ended up being an unbalanced mess. Some characters did receive justified nerfs, but many times those nerfs just decreased everyone's kill potential and damage output, without actually changing them enough for many other top tiers to emerge, effectively just prolonging matches and making the game more boring to play and watch. So, maybe these guys will do a better job. I mean, honestly, it's kind of funny. If you watch my old video criticizing Smash 4, it really seems like most of the things I wanted came to fruition in this game, despite the negativity I received from the Smash 4 fanbase initially. Yet those changes are praised now. Weird how that always works, huh? But really, going forward, I hope the issues I've mentioned throughout the video get addressed in the future. Ultimate has the potential to be the best Smash game as well as my personal favorite. The negatives here don't outweigh the positives at the end of the day. If they did, I wouldn't have spent so many nights up with this game like I mentioned in the beginning, or just how many hours I put into it as a whole already. It, offline, truly is a really fun experience, and I haven't felt that much joy with a Smash game in quite a long time.